case you haven't seen me enough already today, this is me. I lead the broadband CPE technology side for AT&T, all the gateways, extenders, management systems. Been doing this forever. So now we can get on. This is my view of where we're at. Most of the stuff in here, think of this as Jason and some of the operators' conversations as opposed to set in stone. You all have the opportunity to join and change. But I look at purple in kind of three buckets: functionality, stability, enhancements. There was Peter came out and is gonna at some point publish the 250 requirements that he believes the carriers need. For me, I think that's where a lot of our development focus is at this point. This is not to say that we don't do any of this other stuff. Obviously, we always include bug fixes and enhancements in each release, but that is the focus. Get to a point where 100%, no issues, we can launch this on any box you want. And then as we do that, and as we ramp deployments over this next year, we're gonna start to see some increased defects. It just happens when you get something you've been testing in the labs, relatively small deployments in a large environment with a diverse set of networks and homes and stuff, there's going to be more defects that we have to focus on. So that's for me where the next bucket comes, stability. And there will be some opportunities to stabilize this code base. And then it gets to the fun part, right? We have code that is stable. We don't have to worry about the O's and ones anymore going in and out. And then we can start to look at enhancements, or specifically maybe the building block for enhancements. So 2025, and excuse my dates, they may be a little off, but 2 major releases and 1 potentially in December. And then 2 minor releases so far with 1 targeted for the upcoming month. So this is a big, and I think there was another chart earlier, this is a big step forward on what we're doing. 4.0 included Purple Mesh 5.0, a new version LCM, which was a big step forward, a bunch of TR-181 enhancements and WAN and stability enhancements. 4.1, thank you, fresh off the compiler. The team did a great amount of work, and my apologies for having to work over the weekend. But this is a big deal. Upstep to 24.10, Linux kernel 6.6, Purple Mesh 5.1. And then 4.2 at the end of this year adds Purple Mesh 6.0, which, depending on how you deploy Wi-Fi, enables Wi-Fi 7 capabilities. And then upsteps in those, the SOC guys' software to support those functionalities. So, and I think Wojtek had this in his slide earlier, there's been a big change, and he primarily led this, where we used to kind of do things by the seat of the pants a little bit, and now we've gotten to a point where we're issuing quarterly statement of works to multiple development partners in an effort to build the development ecosystem. Now, let's be clear, we would still like all of you to contribute all of your great software for free as an upstream, but the foundation is to expedite the deployment of the Purple software, still investing money in this. And so these are just the ones, the epics features that were included in the RFP. There have been a lot more that were upstreamed and were bug fixes, but we started at the beginning with 11, Q2 went to 27, Q3 is 20, and feel free to participate in the prioritization for Q4. We pushed that out until after the Purple Summit for a lot of reasons you can imagine. But this still leaves 40 plus features in the backlog. And so this is 2026, theoretically, right? 2 major, 2 minor. The goal would be, like we tried to do last year, is to get a prioritized list of features for 2026. And then we can leverage those, not necessarily set in stone, but as a guide to figure out what we're going to include in each of the RFPs. Now, this is perfect world. Doing software, don't live in perfect worlds, so I think there's some important conversations that we need to have as a foundation in the upcoming months, right? So 4.1 delivered, Linux kernel 6.6, 24.10. Not all of the chipset suppliers are on that. And even if they were, some people like me tend to slow roll big significant changes like a new Linux kernel and 24.10. But 4.2, 5.1, 5.2, today at least, are still planned only to support 24.10, 6.6. So when I step back and look, what does that mean for me? Do I have to, if I have a software 4.02 as an example, backport features that I need myself? Do I need to talk to other operators that also have the same issues as me and see if we can get the prpl Foundation to include those new features? Is it none of the above? I think there's an opportunity to have that discussion and get some agreement within the prpl Foundation, because that will go into a series, what I'm going to talk about next, which is how do we define the capacity we have as a foundation for delivery, development, testing, and support for all of those great reference platforms that we had talked about earlier. Agile. So we've been pushing this for a while. I think, from a company, AT&T, we moved from a waterfall development process to Agile around 2018. Wasn't perfect. It's not something you can just flip a switch and go from waterfall to Agile. But it does provide some benefits when you're looking at a regular cadence for quality software with limited resources, we'll put it that way. And so there's been a Tiger team formed that is going to be working on this, looking at the foundation and how we move to this. There's, as part of this, the way agile development works is it's a little bit more, you deliver in sprint buckets as opposed to a big delivery. You can spread your resources out a little bit, but that may drive some additional changes from a foundation thinking perspective. Today we have 2 major, 2 minor releases. If we're doing agile drops, say once a quarter, do we really want an agile drop that is only bug fix? Probably not. What are the optimal timing for shifting software deliveries? So this is where the challenge, one of the benefits and challenges with Agile is that it's pretty firm dates, right? If you can't hit a date, it gets bumped to the next release. And so how do we manage that when you have, software from SOC, software from prpl, software from operators, third-party software that you may have integrated. And aligning all that makes, it's a challenge sometimes. And then how do we get to the appropriate scope and content for each release, right? Normally that's PI planning. We have a lot of partners in here. What is the process to do that? And so this is my list of, from an agile perspective, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I will focus on a couple I think are most important. So create a backlog, determine capacity, estimate the development size of the feature, epic, user story, prioritize your backlog so you know essentially what you want to work on first. Design work on top of features. This is so that you can hand something to a developer and they can start, as opposed to how we used to do it was, I want the gateway to flash red when it's not working, right? That's a little hard to design to. Architecture validation, once again, if we spread it out, this allows some flexibility in that. PI planning is where you define what is going to be in the release. and then deliveries by sprint. So I'll cover the backlog piece. For me is the biggest change for us. Excuse me. So for this, you create a backlog. It's, you create a backlog, you submit into Jira, you provide the details that are needed for someone to look at that and understand exactly what you're asking for. We're gonna need a standardized template just because everybody's idea of what's enough is different. Purple members should review and validate the completeness and clarity of epics. That is us helping the limited Purple Foundation resources just to make sure that, hey, this has everything I need. If I was a developer, I could take it and I could, get close. And the good news for this is we're pretty good at this already. The piece that may be missing a little bit is, some of the sizing and prioritization, but we have a pretty good backlog. Capacity, I think, is the piece, and I misstated it last, is that I think we're gonna have the biggest change for. So it takes a lot of different views to understand what your overall capacity is. Budget, so how much can we fund from a development perspective? Contributions, how big and when are the contributions coming from the Purple members? The feature size, is it something that can be accomplished in a single sprint? Can it be accomplished in a single PI, or does it need to go across multiple PIs? Program increments, sorry, I talk in acronyms. The bug fixes, you need to plan some capacity for both bug fixes that are in your backlog and bug fixes that pop up as part of the features that are delivered. User stories, you need to make sure that those are spread across the different sprints so that you have about the same capacity from a delivery perspective in each of the sprints. Design capacity. For us, we do design release ahead so that when we start a new release, all of the information, people that code, but irregardless, you're gonna have a limited amount of capacity for that and architecture review. And then that's the technology side, and then some of the support side is device volume. We were talking about all of these great new reference platforms. But when you look at it from a development and management perspective, I have to allocate capacity for each new fast track platform at a minimum. There's some CI/CD work for regular platforms, and so that has to be built into what you can manage. Testing throughput. We talked about that. That is, if you have 10 fast track platforms, you have to be able to test each of those from a development perspective. And so that means either more equipment, be more efficient, and then, along that same vein, Wi-Fi testing. So how do you, test all of these reference platforms, and is that testing serial? Can you do it, in parallel? And then build resources for the releases, both human and server, documentation capacity. Hopefully we'll get to these robust release notes, and then branching strategy. So if you have certain things that are more than a single PI or development cycle to develop, do you have a main branch that you're building stuff off of and with a development branch that you can use as necessary, or is there a better way to do it? So just a way to kind of show where this is. Each feature is estimated to determine its fit within a release. That's the sizing. How big is it? Where are you at from a capacity perspective? Every program increment has a defined capacity per release. Doesn't have to be static, but in a lot of cases, your resources don't wildly fluctuate. And so it helps with understanding how much you can do. Capacity planning also accounts for member contributions as well as bug fix and backlog. So you only have a certain amount of things you can do. You have to prioritize one over the other. When capacity is not enough to accommodate all the features in a release, you can defer it to the next release. You can develop features, but only a subset of functionality is tested. And then you can also develop features on a separate branch and then merge that in at the beginning of the next PI. Each PI has a fixed capacity. It spans a specific set period of time. There's multiple ways to do this. Don't think that this is the only way, but in our world, we do 10 weeks, 3 2-week development sprints, a 2-week bug fix only sprint, and then a 2-week planning sprint, which is where we reset the labs and we start to define what the next development or next software package is going to have. Deliveries by sprint. So this is where you can spread your resources out. They don't have to tackle 100% of the features submitted on a particular date. And it also helps for people like us where we're receiving intermittent drops and I can start to do the integration into my equipment. And if we find today, sometimes we find that somebody didn't quite understand the requirements of something, or they did and I didn't, so that when I see it, I say, oh my gosh, there's this big thing missing. With deliveries by sprint, you still have some time to get that fixed before the final GA release. So I think this is, and it also, the other thing it also helps with is understanding where the development is in the process, right? If we wait until a single drop dead date and we get 12 features that aren't delivered because they are not done, then we have a problem. At least if you know if it was supposed to be delivered in sprint 1, hey, they're behind. Do we want to push it to sprint 2, or is this far enough behind we need to bump it out completely? And then for this, and you'll hear me say this every time I talk, the best way to get new software and bug fixes is by contributions from the members, right? And that's part of a successful open source community when you continue. And like selfishly for me, the reason why we contribute is so that the Purple Foundation can manage it going forward. I may have to do the work to develop it the first time, but it's most of the time it's works like I like it to work, and Purple Foundation manages it. We understand that sometimes over the last year there's been some challenges if you contribute something in getting it included in a release. So we are prioritizing an effort to streamline this process and reduce the workload so it's a lot easier for you to contribute. There's a set of contribution guidelines that will be available here shortly. It splits it into 2 pieces. There's one specific for bug fix, and there's one specific for features and improvements. Those should be available to all members to help understand the process. If we follow the process, it makes everything a lot quicker from a integration perspective. And then looking ahead, we are creating a new working group that is looking 18 to 60 months out. And this is for longer term items. Think upgrading Linux kernel versions, new technologies, where we have this larger coordination effort across multiple, either chipset companies or, application developers or whatever, that we can just go to and say, hey, by the way, I need you on Linux kernel XYZ tomorrow. And so this is looking, as we define this stuff and as we identify things, we'll start working with the other working groups, the technical steering committee, product steering committee, to make sure that this is integrated in time for us to all align. Opportunities. So where should Purple go? My request to you is participate. Help us define where Purple is going to go. Become a member if you're not, and if you are a member, participate. So, for me, business services is the next logical step. The hardware that we're getting anymore, I mean, if you look at what we get today compared to 5 years ago, crazy, right? 10 gigs symmetrical is kind of the norm. And so we can leverage that same hardware for at least a subset of business services, but what you don't probably want to do is say, hey, here, customer, you're a business, but you get consumer CPE and software. Good luck. Certifications, device certifications, application, Wi-Fi Easy Mesh, we talked about that. That's going to continue to help provide confidence to the consumers of these devices that, hey, I can use this because it's already gone through the certification process, or I already ran it through the certification process, so I know that it's compliant. AI ML, what would a talk be without AI ML? But I think there are opportunities here, even if it's just, hey, creating a method to integrate your AI model, right? Or your AI service, right? So if there's a low-level API equivalent for something like that. There's also diagnostics, truck rolls, at least in the United States, truck rolls, customer care calls is probably some of the biggest costs in our business. So being able to do something like that. Security, applications, leveraging that for applications, going to be a no-brainer here in a couple years. LCM containers, say it again, easiest way for an operator to differentiate their box, right? It doesn't take very long to integrate, especially once we get to standard high-level APIs across multiple chipset guys, so I can plug in my container and it works. Purple security enhancements. So how do we continue to do this? This is another probably long pole item, post-quantum cryptography. How do we manage this so that we can sell Purple as an extremely secure solution, future-proof? So that's my sales pitch for the roadmap. Please feel free to chat with me if you have any additional ideas. We'll continue to participate in the product steering committee, the technical steering committee, and if you have ideas, feel free to enter them in JIRA, and we will prioritize them for the next year. Thank you.